Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prinsights Global, where I am so thrilled to do this spotlight with Jim Rickards for his best-selling, or latest, I should say, best-selling book, Money GPT. And Jim, you have written so many amazing books, and I have to say, I read your book. I read Money GPT. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy, but I read it on a plane going from Miami to LA. And I only wanted to read the first chapter just to get into it because it was
Mhm.
late. And I read the entire book. By the time I landed, I was overwhelmed with so much amazing information and your clarity and your intelligence of writing that that was all I was talking about for the weeks afterwards. So congratulations on yet another stupendous book. Seriously, I want to keep saying it's your best book ever, but you keep on putting another book out that's your best book ever. This is your best book ever. I know you've written Currency Wars and so many other books. This is important. So,
Well,
what
well,
made you
well,
write this
thank
book now?
yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Naomi. It's very kind, and especially it's high praise coming from you because you're a very successful, very well-known author yourself. So, author to author, when you get those kinds of compliments, it means a lot. So, thank you, and I hope other people enjoy it as well. I mean, candidly, that's one of the things an author aspires to is what they call a page turner, which is you start reading and you can't put it down. So that's a long flight from Rio, but I'm glad that was able to fill up the time. Yeah, it's funny. Books are interesting in the sense that there's certain aspects of the publishing industry that haven't changed very much since the 19th century. I think if Charles Dickens came back, he'd be right at home with the way they do things. A book, we're so used to the digital world. We're on a digital call, we'll distribute this digitally, et cetera, cryptocurrencies and all the rest. But a book is a physical object. It actually takes ink and paper and binding and covers and shipping and storage and all that good stuff. And it takes time. And so when I came up with the idea for the book really about a year and a half ago, I started in the summer of 2022. And we had the book pretty much done earlier this year. My editor at my publisher, Penguin, said, Jim, he said, I love the idea for the book, and I'm sure you can write it. I only have one question. How do we know when the book comes out, this is still going to be topical? I
Yeah.
said, Nikki, I guarantee it. I said, this thing is just getting bigger. It's getting more pervasive, invasive. Pick your adjectives, and I think we'll hit the market. In fact, for over a year, or really a year and a half, almost 2 years at this point, the AI world, particularly as it impacts the stock market, has been like, pom poms, rah rah, higher and higher. We're at all time highs. The book is not about that. Plenty of things one can read or analysts you can listen to about the impact of AI stocks on the stock market indices themselves. We all know the names. It's Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, Amazon. OpenAI is still private, but and a few Facebook and Google. Of course, Facebook, Meta, and Google is Alphabet, and they are, I think, the highest. It's the highest ever percentage of the cap weighted indices concentrated in so few names. Because the S&P is big. The bigger you are, the more impact you have on the index. But those 5 or 6 names I just mentioned are something like 40% of the entire index. In fact, a lot of stocks in the S&P 500 are down for the year. But here goes the so-called Magnificent Seven or Five Horsemen or whatever. So everyone has their opinions on that, and you can get a good debate going. But I would say let's take that to the bar. That's not what the book is about. The book is about AI itself. How is it built? How is it constructed? What does it do in the first instance? And then what is the interaction? This is really the heart of the book between AI and human nature, because human nature has been around for 50,000 years since we climbed out of trees, or 5,000 years of civilization, take your pick. Hasn't changed much as far as I can tell. I can point to financial collapses and panics in the mid 14th century, the 1350s, the House of Bardi and House of Perussi and Florence collapsed, and that spread all the way to London, et cetera. So nothing new there. But AI is in its current form is very new. Now, AI has been around as a science, as a branch of science since the 1950s. I had my first conversations with it with a consultant at A.D. Little in 1979. So that was when I first started learning more about it. I built AI models. We built them for the CIA and for counterterrorism purposes. I know how they work with nodes and edges and layers. And the basic idea is that you have a node, which is a spot on a chart, and it has the equations inside. You feed data into it, and it produces output. But then that output goes to one or more other nodes. So the output of one becomes the input of the other, and then as it works its way up this chain, it's refining its conclusions, and they can be expressed at the end as a probability or in a binary way, et cetera. So we explain that, but it's not. It's all in plain English. I mean, I do take really a kind of PhD level concepts in AI, and I never had any difficulty putting it into plain English. You avoid the jargon, or at least if you use any, you explain it in plain English so the reader can just kind of go along and follow that. And it's not an AI bashing book or a doom and gloom book. So I say right off the bat, like, AI is powerful. It's here. This is not a book about what's coming in 5 years. It's a book about what's here right now. You open your refrigerator and there's a light that says change the water filter. Well, that's AI. I mean, there's a semiconductor in your refrigerator, and it's got a clock going, and it's calculating moisture, and it's telling you what to do. It's on the dashboard of your car, Alexa, Siri. They're all forms of AI. So it's here, and it will cure diseases. It already has come up with a lot of, again, not a pharmaceutical expert, but a lot of it is combinations of molecules, seeing which ones work or which combinations might correlate to certain outcomes. Could that be an effective treatment? Well, humans can do that, but they can do it at a human pace. But you can't look at a billion combinations in a year or a million years for that matter. But a computer can with the right guidance. So I say that it's here, it's powerful, it's going to do a lot of good. I'm not bashing AI, but what I do here is in the book is stay in my lanes, which are capital markets, banking, and national security.
Yeah.
So I'm looking specifically at AI applied to those three things. And it's a nonfiction book, but I start with chapter one in a scenario. I said, well, the
Okay.
best way to explain it, I have enough experience in markets. Why don't I just explain how this could actually happen? And not just crash markets, but closed markets with
Okay.
regulators not knowing what to do, when to reopen them, in other words. Um, and I hope people enjoy that. I have, there's a guy who's a billionaire, runs a private family office, and he has an assistant, Sarah, but Sarah's a robot. And he comes in the morning, he says, "Good morning, Sarah." And Sarah says, "Good morning," and gives him all the market information. But that vignette, that little scene, illustrates one of the problems with AI, which is we anthropomorphize inanimate objects. It's just human nature. Alexa becomes our friend. Hey Alexa, turn down the lights. Hey Alexa, turn up the heat a little bit. And Alexa goes, yes, well, thank you. And we sort of treat them as friends, and that's what this guy does with his digital assistant. But I make the point, they're not your friends. It's pure math. It's just, if you understand, it's just math. Artificial intelligence is a bit of a misnomer. It's not intelligent. What it does, artificial intelligence mimics the output of human intelligence, but it does so in a way that bears no relationship to how humans actually think. I mean, how the brain works, that's a really big mystery. I mean, we've learned some, and we've made insights, and progress has been made, but the best scientists don't really know how the brain works. So it's hardly the case that you could digitize it and write the code, but it's meant to kind of mimic the outputs. But as humans, we tend to give it more credit than it deserves and kind of treat it like a friend, which is a mistake. And the other thing I point out is something called the fallacy of composition. Now, it
Okay.
sounds fancy, but it's a pretty basic concept. So let's say you're at a baseball game, and you don't have a good view because the person in front of you is too tall, or they're wearing a funny hat, or whatever. So you go, well, I know what to do. I'll stand up and I'll get a better view. Well, you stand up and you do get a better view. All of a sudden, you can see the whole field. But what happens next? The person behind you stands up, and the person behind her stands up, and pretty soon the whole stadium's on their feet. Nobody's better off because your relative position is unchanged. Everybody's worse off because you're all standing. So the idea is that something that makes perfect sense at the individual level, it's the best strategy for you or for me, is catastrophic at scale. If you just keep doing it, it has very bad results. Take that idea, bring it over to the stock market. So let's say you have a stock market crash, and they just happen. We don't even have to get into what could cause it. It doesn't matter. They just happened. March 2020, the stock market fell 30% in 30 days. It wasn't the biggest crash in history, but it was the fastest crash of that magnitude in history, 30% in 30 days. So what do people do? They watch it go down. They're watching CNBC, whatever, and they're like, "Oh, it'll come back. It'll come back. It's just a dip. I'm right. The market's wrong." And then all of a sudden, they hit the panic button. They're like, "Sell everything, get
Okay.
cash, go to the sidelines, and wait it out." And then, at some point, it'll hit bottom, and then tiptoe back in and catch the next wave up. That's a very good individual strategy. It works. But what happens if everyone does it? You have all sellers, no buyers. The market goes straight down, blows through the circuit breakers, blows through the second circuit breaker, and goes to the floor. And then you have to close the markets. That's what, now, some of that is human nature. It's been around. But when you harness it to AI, because AI doesn't have any nuance, AI would uses what's called a training set. So a training set are all the materials that it studies, it reads in order to figure out what to do, how to act like us. Because the idea is you have enough, and you can buy the internet. You can buy the whole internet. It's for sale, a billion pages, however many, or you could buy a subset. So the computer studies that and it goes, I've got it. Sell everything, go to cash, wait it out, and tiptoe back in. And it doesn't have the nuance. It doesn't say to itself, "Gee, should I buy the dips, or should I talk to somebody else, or maybe there's some opportunities here, or maybe we can do something differently." It literally lacks all those capacities. So the human nature the aspect of human nature that hits the panic button, combined with a computer, because what we're always doing, we're outsourcing the trading decisions to the computers. There are several hedge funds already launched. I've spoken to some of the managers where they let the AI pick the stocks. They keep an eye on it, but they don't do it at all, and they're having some success. Now it's like a lot of things. The first people to do it, find some opportunity, and everyone jumps in, and then the opportunity goes away. But so we're outsourcing trading decisions. We're certainly outsourcing the kind of portfolio decisions I talked about, and with none of the aspect of human nature that might kind of know how to put on the brakes a little bit. That's a very dangerous combination.
Yeah, and you mentioned all of your background that goes into this, and of course you're noted in the financial space, the capital market space, the national security space, and what you've done here is add to that the mathematician space, I think, and the probability space that actually encompasses all of those things. If this, then what? And the mathematics of AI, and just that first chapter, and not to give anything away, but that's one of the reasons everybody, by the way, should buy this book and will not be able to put it down. Obviously, read the entire book, but that first chapter where you contextualize the layers of what can happen when decisions are made around the world based on AI, and then the amplification that AI does by being AI, and how that ultimately can close these global shutdowns. And then you take that into a more recent just phenomenon that we all saw about a year or so ago, which was the collapse of SVB. And you talk about the AI
Right.
implications of what happened there. And that was really interesting to me because, and I think it should be to everyone else who has money in any bank, which is pretty much probably anyone who's listening to this or watching this. Um, you have a very different take on what happened there, I think, than a lot of what was reported at the time connected to AI.
Yeah, the most people with money in the bank up to a certain amount, you're like, well, $250,000, it's FDIC insured, and you can have two accounts. The husband and wife can have two separate accounts, and they're both insured, and you can use four different banks, and they're all insured. So you can get up to, with a little bit of paperwork, get up to several $1 million in cash in the bank and CDs and so forth, and have all of it insured if you spread it around the right way. But there are limits to that. 97% of the deposits at Silicon Valley Bank were not FDIC insured. Cisco had a $3 billion deposit. There were crypto exchanges, when they're selling, pardon me, selling cryptocurrencies and taking dollars. They're putting the dollars in the member bank, like getting it out of the crypto exchange, putting it in a member bank. They had the money there, and I don't even know how many, but scores, if not hundreds, of Silicon Valley startups where maybe you get like an A round and you get 5 million or $10 million in the door, and they had their money at Silicon Valley Bank also. And so what happened, we described the collapse in some detail, but it's like any run on the bank, although AI did accelerate the crash because we all remember grainy black and white photos of the 1930s, or mostly men in overcoats and fedoras lined up around the block on a rainy day trying to get their money out of the bank. And of course, it was too late. The doors were closed. The insiders had already taken the money. So that's the classic run on the bank. Well, this was no different dynamically, except it was much faster. You just take your iPhone, a couple swipes or taps, the money's gone. Then you text your friend, "Hey, get out before it's too late." Everyone's doing the same thing. The network effects kick in, and that bank really went down in 2 days. It wasn't like 2 months of, gee, we got to keep an eye on this. It was literally 2 days. So at 6 p.m. on the Friday, I believe pretty sure it was March 10th, as memory serves, 10th or 11th, somewhere in there, but it was a Friday night. At 6 p.m., the FDIC comes out and says, "We're closing the bank." Okay. Deposits up to $250,000 are fully insured. Yep, we expect that. Any deposit in excess of that, we're going to give you like a due bill, like a chip, like a receivable certificate. We'll get back to you. And this was, we're not sure what it's worth. We have to sell the assets, figure out the size of the hole in the balance sheet. It'll take time. We'll give you 10 cents on the dollar, 90 cents on the dollar. We don't know. We got to figure it out and haircut the bonds and wipe out the equity and all that. That was the direct descendant of the 2014 G20 meeting in Brisbane, Australia, when they came up with the concept of the bail-in. Everything in 2008, 2009, as you well know, was a bailout, where taxpayer money was used to prop up the banks. And people all over the world, in the United States for sure, but all over the world, were furious. So like, wait, you use my money so Jamie Dimon or some other guy could, or woman could keep their $20 million a year job and their $500 million of stock options. They suffered no pain at all, but used the taxpayer money to do it. So the leaders said, "Yeah, you're right. So from now on, no more bailouts. It's going to be bail-in." What that means is that a bank in distress, first you wipe out equity. Equity, sorry, you're done. Then you guarantee the insured deposits, 250,000 in the U.S., 100,000 euros in Europe, but whatever it is, okay, you're good for that. Anything in excess of that is at risk. Bonds are going to take a haircut depending on the size of the hole in the balance sheet and so forth. So all the lenders, the bondholders, the uninsured depositors are all going to, and certainly the stockholders are all going to get whacked before a penny of government money is used. And that's what the FDIC said. It's like, hey, nice going. You actually stuck to your deal. Well, then you had what I call the crybaby billionaires. They spent the entire weekend calling the White House, Bill Ackman, all these guys. And they were like, "You don't understand. All the startups in Silicon Valley, they all have the money in Silicon Valley Bank. It's all going to be wiped out. They're going to shut their doors. They can't pay their rent. They're going to lay off people." Leaving aside that 90% of those firms fail anyway, but no, that's just a footnote. But the fact is, some of them are winners. And so the White House said, okay. So then at 6 o'clock on Sunday, 48 hours after the bail-in announcement, they said, "Just kidding. All deposits are insured up to 100%. And beyond that, then the Fed and the Treasury said, "Oh, by the way, if you're a member bank and you have Treasury notes, send them to us. We'll give you par value. We'll give you 100 cents on the dollar." Now, bear in mind, they were only worth 70 or 80 cents because they had been bought when rates were 2%. Now rates, at least at the time, were closer to 5%. And so the bond value is inverse to the interest rate. So the values were like 70, 80 cents on the dollar. Fed said, "We'll give you 100 cents on the dollar, 1 year loan, take the collateral, low interest rate, and see you in a year." And it worked. I mean, there were 5 more bank failures. It was Credit Suisse and First Republic and a Signature Bank, and Silvergate Bank was another one, Silicon Valley Bank. So the big 5. But I thought but things calmed down after that. But I thought to myself, okay, you got through it by guaranteeing every deposit in the system and guaranteeing every Treasury note at par. What else have you got? I mean, what else have you got? And there's nothing left for you to do to deal with the next panic because you've fired all your bullets. There is one thing left, which is to nationalize the banks, and then that's where I kind of leave it, which is there'll be another banking crisis. There already is. The government has used up all their bullets with guaranteeing bonds and deposits, created enormous moral hazard. Moral hazard is people are reckless because they think the government's going to bail them out, and the government usually does, or at least has for 30 years or so. And again, you pointed at this in your books. Um, but again, with the AI connection, is if you're analyzing banks, and I see the risk in banks between it's inexact, but between 200 billion and 900 billion in deposits. So the big ones are too big to fail. So Citi, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, they're too big to fail. We know that. Little banks tend not to fail. They can, but they're much better run. I keep some of my money at a bank that was founded in 1877. I figure, well, if you made it through everything that's happened since 1877, you probably know what you're doing. But there is this in between level. The large regional banks, again, 200 to 900 billion of deposits, not deemed too big to fail. They may be in the end, because now you're into contagion. Banks failed, and that'll spread as typical run on the bank. It's a run on the entire banking system. But I would be, when I talk to clients and others, I say, there are obviously a lot of balance sheet metrics and certainly off balance sheet information that you look at and evaluate in the bank. But I've added a new one to my list, which is the ratio of uninsured to total deposits. What percentage of your total deposits are uninsured? If that number is above 30%, that's a bright red light. If it's above 90%, it's an accident waiting to happen. So you would look at that as well. But again, it's an illustration. There's nothing new about bank panics. They've been around forever. But when you harness it to AI and leave the decision making to AI, and you get into this feedback loop where the humans are relying on AI, again, we treat it like a friendly advisor, and the AI doesn't have the nuance or the discretion or the judgment you need to fix these things. It just collapses.
Yeah. I'm talking with Jim Rickards, the best-selling author of the great new book that you all have to buy, Money GPT, and the AI and the threat to the global economy. Excuse me. I've gotten off a plane to talk to you. I have no voice.
Okay, yeah, that'll dry out. Yeah.
Yes. But you also talk about the national security implications of relying on AI, versus, incorporating the human judgment that we have.
Right.
Can you address that a bit?
Sure. It's AI national security, but with specific emphasis on nuclear warfighting. And they say timing is everything. I thought it was a very, very important topic and needed to be explained. Little did I know that we would be on the brink of a nuclear war as we speak, as the book came out.
Yeah, you were exceptionally, as always, prescient on the information you have. And this is why, again, all of your books, Jim, have so much longevity. They're timely and have longevity at once.
Well, I thank you. I also tell people, I'm glad you enjoyed the book. I really hope I'm wrong, but the danger is I might not be, and people need to be prepared. So I started studying nuclear warfighting in the late 1960s. The authors and scholars I studied had done a lot of their work in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. So it was Roberta and Albert Wohlstetter, Paul Nitze, Henry Kissinger, but the biggest brain was Herman Kahn. And what Herman Kahn said, and he said, how does a nuclear war break out? How will it happen? I said, nobody wakes up on a sunny day and says, hey, nice day, think I'll start a nuclear war. That's not how it happens. It happens through escalation. Two antagonists confront each other. One does something provocative. The other one responds, in a more threatening way. The first one responds back. It's like a poker game. I'll see your bet and raise you X, and you keep going. And the way he described it, said, when you're in that dynamic, you're climbing the nuclear ladder. You're climbing a ladder one step at a time to a full-scale nuclear war. And you have to, there are three ways. So there are three things you have to do once you're in that mode. Number one, know what you're doing. Understand that you are climbing a nuclear ladder. This is not just warfare or politics as usual. If nuclear powers are involved and you're going up these steps, you are climbing towards a nuclear war, number one. So understand what the dynamic is. Number two, take a beat, just stop. And then number three, climb down, come down, back away from that nuclear war, or else you will destroy the earth. And he had it was highly articulated. He had 54 steps and all different scenarios. And, each protagonist was not necessarily on the same step at the same time. You might be closer to a first strike. It might be emphasizing different things. There's a lot of nuance to it, but that's basically the dynamic. Now, before I finish with that, I want to just point out there are two such scenarios going on in the world today. This is not theoretical. One is Ukraine. And again, people on both sides of that take it to the bar. My point is that there's no question that we're on that ladder going 2008, the Bucharest Declaration, 2014, CIA and MI6 pull off a coup. Putin takes Crimea. The Ukrainians attack the Donbass. Putin starts a special military operation. U.S. sends in tanks and Patriot anti-missile batteries and attack those missiles. F-16s. Russia comes in with hypersonics. Again, pick your side, but you have two nuclear powers going up exactly the ladder that Herman Kahn described. Same thing in the Middle East. We all know that the massacre that happened on October 7th, 2023. Israel invades Hamas, Gaza, and attacks Hamas. Lebanon, Hezbollah starts shooting missiles. Israel shoots back at Hezbollah. The Houthis close the Red Sea. The Iranians fire missiles. Israel fires back. U.S. is getting more involved. Again, pick your side, but that's not my point. My point is you've got nuclear powers all around: Israel, Russia, the United States, and Iran's maybe 6 months away. So you're climbing that ladder. So in both cases, how do you get back down? Well, the paradigmatic case is the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we were climbing the ladder, and then Khrushchev sent Kennedy a letter, actually passed it through a journalist, and the letter, I'm paraphrasing, but said, we've tied the knot. Do we want to keep pulling on the knot, or do we want to untie it? That was and Kennedy said, let's untie it. They backed down, exactly as Kahn described. Now, not very well known, and I have all the, but interestingly, a lot of documents in the 1980s were declassified in the early 2000s. So we actually know more about these incidents today than was known, at least publicly at the time. But in 1983, the KGB, it was the Soviet Union, but basically Russia, were using a primitive form of artificial intelligence. They had a system called V Ryan. And what it did, it compared the United States and Russia in various dimensions: power, economy, natural resources, population, et cetera. And they knew the U.S. was ahead, but the question was how far. And the more that gap widened, the computer said at a certain point, the advantage becomes so great that the U.S. will launch a nuclear strike because they'll feel they can get away with it. Well, we were getting very close to that point. And then at the same time, the U.S. and NATO, with the U.S. was conducting a war game. And the war game was a nuclear war game. And that was the game was, how would it play out? What would it look like if we were going to start a nuclear war with Russia, or in a nuclear war with Russia? Well, the KGB detected the war game activities, looking at their own AI, and it was AI. The Speed Ryan system said the U.S. is likely to shoot first. They got ready for nuclear war. They warmed up their bombers. They got their missile silos ready. They were ready to attack. And it was a U.S. Lieutenant General, General Perutz, who saw what the Russians were doing, and he said exactly what Kahn recommended: time out. Let's dial down the war game. Let's stop. Now, we knew it was a game, but the Russians didn't know it was a game. They thought the game was a front for an actual attack. So by dialing it down, that was a good signal, and the Russians put the bombers back in the hangars, and we got through that one. There was one other case. There was another AI system, codenamed Oko, where it could pick up U.S. missiles attacking the Soviet Union. And one day it did. This was, again, 1983. And it gave a launch signal. The AI system said launch. And the doctors launch on warning. Like if missiles are coming in, you don't wait for them to hit. You shoot first, so you still have your missiles. So so this it was a Lieutenant Colonel Petrov, Stanislav Petrov, got the signal, launch, and his orders were call your superiors and they'll take it from there. He disobeyed orders. He had worked on the system. He knew it might have flaws, and he noticed that there were only 5 missiles coming in. Oh, I say only. There were 5 nuclear missiles coming in. But he said the U.S. isn't going to attack with 5 missiles. If they attack, it's going to be 200 missiles. So it's maybe a false alarm. He bet his life and his country's future on that hunch, and he was right. And he later became known as the man who saved the world. Now here's the point. In both cases, we were on the escalatory ladder. In both cases, we backed off, which is what you're supposed to do. But it was 2 officers disobeying orders, not following their standing orders, not going up the chain of command, and relying on what? Because the data said this is a nuclear attack. They relied on gut instinct, intuition, what we might call common sense, and that I have a whole chapter on the form of logic behind that. There's computers, without spending too much time, computers can do deductive logic with flaws. They can do inductive logic with flaws. But there's a third branch called abductive logic, and that's what we would call common sense, intuition, or gut instinct. That's what saved the world twice. And my point is, keep AI out of the kill chain for nuclear warfighting. My advice to the U.S. military is, if you want to have it over here on the side as some kind of a digital advisor, maybe, but don't put it in the decision-making process, because it will not, it lacks the ability to stop and back down the ladder, which we just described. It lacks that nuance, and you'll go straight to a nuclear war. So on that happy note, but my point is, the capital markets danger is real. The
Sure.
banking danger is real, and the nuclear warfighting danger is real. And again, I'm not bashing AI. I'm saying understand these problems and address them. Don't over rely on them, or else you're going to get one of these catastrophes.
Yeah, and you make that point towards the end of your book as well. I mean, throughout the book, that you're not, it's not at all an AI bashing. You're basically laying out what's happening and where the limit can be. And you basically make the point that it's not like AI won't work, it's that it could work too well. And therefore, we do need to ensure that we have humanity always in this decision, especially key making decision making spaces, whether it's in the economy and financial systems or in national security elements.
Right. I say, I hope people enjoy the book, but there's an enormous amount of documentation, footnotes, sources in the bibliography. Did quite a bit of research before I wrote this. So I always say that that's worth the price of the book alone, because if you want to dive deeper on any of these topics, the source material is there. But I was, but yeah, I read all the book, Kissinger and Eric Schmidt and some Mustafa Suleiman and others have written all these books on AI, and they're fine. I mean, you learn a lot, but they just had this cheerleader aspect to them that made me a little bit nervous. I think people are missing things.
Well, I want to thank you so much. I wish we could talk forever, but I know you have to get on to the rest of your evening. And also, I just want to thank you, Jim. And I also want to tell everyone who is watching this to seriously go buy this book, Money GPT, AI and the Threat to the Global Economy, because it is seriously important for where we are in humanity, where we are in AI, and where, Jim, you have just opened an entire just a series of subjects in any one chapter that can be discussed for decades to come. It's a brilliant book. It's brilliantly written. It's a bestseller. It's going to, I think, be one of your best bestsellers. And I say that in conjunction with having read all of your other bestsellers. And I just want to thank you so much, everybody. Again, buy Money GPT now. Jim Rickards, do you want to say anything else before we close off here for the evening?
No, thank you. It was ranked by the Financial Times as one of the best new books in economics. They had a short list. It's ranked in Amazon best new release in finance and best new release in economic conditions, and our stars are up there. So it's getting, and that's gratifying. It's getting a very good reception from the general readership and some of the financial publications. So, but thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to Prinsights Global and this important spotlight on Money GPT written by the amazing Jim Rickards. Thank you.